Insights are still incredibly important. Like, I feel like when we talk to clients, like every single conversation is what kind of insights can you bring to the table? What do you have that's different that I can't get elsewhere? Frankly, the attention piece, people want to talk to us about it because of this data set that we have that's pretty vast and what that could mean relative to media. And we get asked about these kinds of data sets all the time. So I don't think the value of insights is going anywhere.
This is the Snarketing Podcast. For marketers, by marketers. Talking to marketers with just a touch of snark. Now, here are your hosts, Valerie Vespa and Matt Wurst.
Greetings and happy Halloween season to those who celebrate. I'm Matt Wurst.
And I am Valerie Vespa.
It took you a minute there to get your name out. Were you struggling, Valerie? I don't know.
I was thinking about Halloween.
Oh, yeah. What's it go as? There's so much pressure every year. God, costume anxiety. I already have it. But that is not what we're going to talk about today on this episode of the Snarketing Podcast. Although, maybe at some point we should dedicate an entire hour to Halloween's past and future. Because I think it, for me, is the most underappreciated marketing event. I know we talked about it with Vinny from Hershey's and others who do, it's a big time. Of course, it's probably their Super Bowl, if not the actual Super Bowl.
Yeah.
But it's also this week A&A Masters, which is yet another the Super Bowl of Orlando-related marketing activities. I'm excited to be back at the Rosen Shingle.
Oh my goodness!
Where I've definitely put some blood and sweat and maybe some tears into that hotel, and which, if you think about it, is probably not the grossest thing that carpet has in terms of DNA on it. But we'll leave that for another episode as well, because this. Shout out to our friends at the A&A. We love you. Keep coming back. The episode that we are about to unleash, the conversation we are about to have, is with someone who I think is one of the smartest, most intelligent people in our industry, and is connecting lots of dots, making things happen, moving things forward, other cliches, but also things that are important that she's doing. But you also share something very important in common.
Exactly.
Neala.
I mean, the fact that she's so smart and that she's from Boston is not...
Oh, Boston I was talking about. You are smart. You do have that in common as well, but I was talking about the Boston part. So you have two things in common at the very least. So you know what? Let's just jump right in, because she probably has so much to share that I want to make sure we use the best use of our time. All right? You in?
Perfect. I love that.
Let's meet Neala Brown from Teads.
Today's guest doesn't just talk about attention. She measures it, models it, and turns it into a business outcome. We're joined by Neala Brown, SVP of Strategy and Operations at Teads, the people helping the world's biggest brands make sure their ads actually, get noticed. And she's got opinions on how marketers are still measuring campaigns like it's 2015, not 2025. Hello to you, Matt and Valerie, and welcome, Neala.
Hi, Neala, and welcome to our podcast. We are so grateful you are able to make some time out of your likely busy schedule to join us. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk to you guys today.
So I'll let my hair down and tell you a little secret. Of all of the guests that we have had so far in the last 3 years, I have probably done more preparation for this conversation, which isn't saying much considering that I don't often prepare, but just seeing your experience, your background, I kind of got intimidated. So I had to just, you had me. You had my attention, which is an interesting point that we can jump into, because that is where I want to focus, at least to start.
That's a good one.
So let's kick off by talking about that thing that we are all chasing as marketers in media in our world, attention. And what that means for brands, for media, and I don't know, maybe my sanity, If attention is this new currency, how are we not all broke right now? Let's just start there.
And is it new? Is attention new?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like such an interesting topic, and I feel like it's one of those things that has really like kind of caught us all by storm. Like you hear about it at every conference, like everybody has an opinion on it. Some people are really bought in, some people don't necessarily buy into it. And then like when you just think about all of the different kind of aspects of it, creative, media, currency, the theory of it, and like the academic aspects of it versus like practicality and usability, like in market for like a media buy. These are all such like different things. Like I think that we all know, like the concept is not new, certainly. Like, and the truth is like, you can't have impact with an ad unless somebody's paying attention to it. Like it's pretty intuitive, like at the end of the day. I think what's certainly new about the space is how it is different platforms, different companies are engaging on whether or not there is a measure of it that can be used to make decisions. And that's interesting to me, certainly. I will tell you, I started kind of talking to partners in this space pre-COVID, had conversations with a number of different partners, and I was still agency side at this point. And the reason it was interesting to me to start, and like what got me, was the notion of having something to help me make decisions, in particular in kind of that upper mid-funnel area where the outcome measurement that you rely on is not something you get on a daily basis. Like when we think about performance media and how it is you get access to actionable data, whether it's conversions, whether it's something that just precedes a conversion, that's something that's really usable to make decisions on, to build models on. And in the upper funnel, like I remember writing measurement plans where like our proxy KPI was reach or unique reach or just impressions even. Like these aren't things that like, yes, you want to achieve them, absolutely. And reach is critical to how we do this. But in terms of optimizing a media plan, not as straightforward as a CPA or a conversion-based metric. And so that kind of got me interested, honestly. Like, was there something that was like practical and usable that could help me make decisions and drive me to a better outcome starting in that upper funnel? And I think it's a space that's really kind of, again, taken shape, again, differing opinions. For me, what I'm most focused on in it, and that gets to some of the work that we've done at Teads certainly as well, is the so what. We don't need another metric in our toolkit. The digital measurement metric toolkit is vast. It is fragmented at times. And so if we are going to add one in, it has to be something that matters. It has to be something that helps us make decisions. And so what we've been keenly focused on is the notion of, is this a better metric than some of the other metrics we have in our toolkit? And what is its relationship with outcomes? Because then it becomes interesting to me from a practical use case standpoint in terms of how it is we're making media decisions.
I feel like that's the word that has taken over this industry in the last, period of time. Outcomes. Everything's about outcomes now, which I also always feel like it was about, but things have changed, measurability and what you're talking about. So now we have a word for it.
So like, can you go like an extra step in there? Like, so what wormhole did you go down to kind of figure out where to go from there? Because it all makes sense for sure. I work in out of home, so as you could imagine, this is like the story of my life. But anyway, go on.
100%. And like honestly, it started with talking to a number of different thought leaders and people that were, actually doing work in the space, understanding what it is that they were looking at. And then I think also kind of untangling, again, like the academia of it, which is super important, like the underlying research, the eye tracking studies that underpin the space, but then how it is that was translating to something that, again, was able to be practically used at scale in the market. When I joined Teads, it was certainly something that attracted me to the business in terms of some of the work they were doing. It was a space, again, in my agency life that I had spent some time on. Teads was taking a unique stance because Teads also has an entire studio unit. So was also looking at it from a creative aspect. So had done a ton of work in the creative space. And when I joined the business, it was really kind of a little bit of a transitory moment in terms of taking all the great work that had been done in creative and then starting to understand what was happening in the media space as well. And for me, we work agnostically with a number of different partners in the space. And it was really about validation of that metric. And so what we've done is a pretty huge body of work relative to how it is we can actually correlate attention to those kind of post-campaign outcome metrics and to understand, are there different KPIs where we can actually attach targets to them? Again, for me, it's about how we can make this practical and usable. What is the practical use case here? I mean, I think the other thing too, for Teads in particular, is that we're really dedicated to quality, whether that's creative quality, which again gets to some of the attention work being done there, whether that's media quality, whether that's understanding different publishers, different platforms, different placements, all of those bits, and really kind of, and that's really a part of our DNA. And so understanding where the quality lives, how it is we can optimize to quality, and what that means relative to outcomes has been a big piece of it for us here at Teads. And I was excited about that. That felt interesting. It felt like something that the industry was, really excited about. And to be able to, again, dive in, validate that, see where the use cases were, and then start to practically apply that. And I'm a practical gal, like at my core, like I come from data and measurement. I want to understand how things are used and whether or not I can get a practical use case out of them. So that's where we've been really focused in the attention space. And we have validated it. We have done, again, a pretty broad body of work in terms of connecting it to outcomes. And I think for us, it's about understanding, again, what the right use cases are. Is there a way for us to think about, guaranteeing to it at the KPI level? We have data that supports different attention thresholds for different KPIs. And what does that mean, again, for brand marketers who are ultimately trying to drive things like lifts in awareness, consideration, purchase intent? We've done some exploratory work in other parts of the funnel as well. We do see that there's a strong correlation between quality media as measured by attention and outcomes across the funnel. So I think that, that's where we've really kind of, again, tried to dive in is making it make sense for brands and advertisers. I think, again, this is something that everybody hears about, but people want to understand the so what. They want to understand how they should use it. And so we're trying to enable that for our clients through partnership and through the attention program that we had launched a few years ago.
Sure. So like you've been clearly in the media trenches from agency land to ad tech, right? What's
wow,
one of the
trenches? You make it sound so
I
glamorous.
know.
This could
Sorry.
be fun.
No, it is. It's a lot of sizzle. So what's one thing about the industry that hasn't changed as much as you think it has? Or like, do you think like we are progressing at the rate, like the work that you're doing, for example, do you think you're like getting to that sweet spot where we need to be?
I mean, I think like, here's the thing, like we're always making advancements on things and we're like chipping away at things, like using like attention as an example. I think we are starting to find use cases. There are clients that are starting to adopt this like as like a practical, metric that they are using, but like we haven't eliminated a lot of the complexity in the ecosystem overall. I think that it was funny. I was on in a conversation a few months ago about this topic in particular, and somebody posed the question, like, do you believe in standardization for like this space in particular? And my response to that was, listen, I think that like standardization simplifies everything. It makes it really easy. It makes it easy for you to understand like what is meeting the standard, what isn't. But my fear, and I think this gets to kind of some of the complexity that we haven't necessarily navigated our way out of, is that if we standardize, does that limit innovation in the space? We've now defined this. And so does that limit the way that we're thinking differently, the way that we're able to innovate? And so like, I don't have a clear answer on that because like there is kind of that tension there, but I do think that like in terms of the ecosystem, so much continues to change, which is so exciting. And I think that's why we all stay in this to some degree, is that there's always something new to learn, something new to kind of get your head around, but that adds to the complexity of it all, which, we're all, I think, still trying to navigate.
Within your remit, right? And we all know Teads at this point. You guys have been around for a long time in this industry, which is saying a lot. And you've been there a good number of years, which is also saying a lot. And you've had what I think, at least on paper / LinkedIn bio, you've had some different roles and responsibilities. You're now overseeing strategy and operations. It used to be strategy and insights, and this is kind of a real question and kind of a joke question, but I'd love to hear how you answer it. In a world where AI and innovation are moving things at the speed of data is already outdated by the time you see outdated, are insights for humans to really understand really as important as they used to be? Or should we be optimizing now in a way? Like operations makes more sense now to me because we're never going to be caught up with the insights. So you have to kind of ensure that things are working in a way without needing to be involved. I don't know if that question makes sense, but in my head, I feel like we're moving into a post-data, post-insights world where, yes, they're still important, but we don't need to be as involved because it's going to be self-optimizing.
So I think that's fair. I do think, however, that insights are still incredibly important. Like, I feel like when we talk to clients, like every single conversation is what kind of insights can you bring to the table? What do you have that's different that I can't get elsewhere? Frankly, like the attention piece, like people want to talk to us about it because of this data set that we have that's pretty vast. We also, we have a tool that allows for us to understand content consumption because of the code on page that we have. And we're able to understand patterns and how it is people are actually consuming content. It's actually really interesting around kind of like seasonal events and when it is people start consuming things and what that could mean relative to media. And we get asked about these kinds of data sets all the time. So I don't think like the value of insights is going anywhere.
No, it's not like macro, micro, like has the balance shifted a little bit maybe, right?
But I do think that like with the promise of AI, the buzzword of the moment, how we get to those insights certainly is changing. And frankly, the other thing that like to me is interesting is the kinds of data that can come together in different ways to develop insights. Like I do think that historically, like you still have had fragmentation of different kinds of insights. Like even at an agency, like you had like your strategy and planning team that worked in tools like GWI and things like that. And then you had like a measurement and data and analytics team that was looking at things like performance relative to a campaign. Like how do those worlds converge in an even more powerful way? And obviously they do. Like these teams are talking to each other on the back end and you're understanding how it is your audience insights in the planning stage then translate into performance in the back end and how you can optimize that. But, with I think the promise of AI and how it is, we can build agents to kind of mine data in a way that is far faster and probably far more vast in terms of what can be kind of analyzed and brought together. Like, is there opportunity there? I mean, I think that all of us who have spent time deep in Excel sheets in agencies, certainly the notion of having some of that done for us and being able to kind of focus on what are those insights? Can we validate them? But then again, like, how do you apply them? I feel like that also like there's opportunity there from like a capacity standpoint. When you think about kind of how it is time spent can be changed when we think about the impact of AI on workflow in particular, like that to me is what's interesting here. Like, do the insights actually get to be more meaningful because of where it is we're actually able to spend time?
I want to go back for a second to the whole attention thing and how you are looking at different facets of a campaign, let's say, and figuring out all the data behind the attention stuff. So like, are there general trends you're seeing from like a creative standpoint that lend itself to driving better attention? Like seasonality you mentioned, like, are there certain like trends that like some funny things that you learned along the way that might be interesting to the audience?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a creative standpoint, I think some of the things that you might traditionally think about in terms of like human imagery and keeping your brand on screen, those are highly validated. I think like for us, what's interesting is how it is we ensure the formats that we produce capture attention. I think we've all heard like over the course of the years, building fit for platform and things like that, and how it is you adapt creative depending on like you can't just show a 60-second TV spot on a mobile ad. Like that doesn't work. And so how it is we're actually generating those insights to understand what is engaging users in the creative space, I think, is important. I think the other thing too is format. There are certainly nuances in terms of format, in terms of what is actually generating attention. I think the other thing that's interesting is channel. Like, I think that there's some things about this that are relatively intuitive. The TV screen tends to score higher than, a display ad or something like that. But I think like the one thing that's interesting to me about that is when you think about attention, and again, getting back to like practical use cases, if you were to just optimize just for attention, volume of attention, what you're ultimately going to do is limit your reach and probably increase your CPMs, because that's a much smaller supply set than kind of the broad number of impressions that we have available in the media ecosystem. So for me, what I actually like to kind of dive in on, and why knowing all of these different things about the way different formats, the way different channels perform, is how do you get to the right media mix that overall delivers the right amount of attention to deliver on your overall KPI. And that's different based on the KPI.
Right.
You might not need quite as much for one KPI versus another, but
more of like a priming effect or something might be more relevant. Yeah.
And how it is different channels. I mean, it's again, getting back to traditional media planning to some degree, but having kind of this linchpin that does seem to have a higher correlation to our outcome. How do we balance that and get to the right overall kind of attention threshold while also balancing things like scale of impressions and media efficiency?
So attention threshold, that's a fascinating concept. Can you explain what that means in my CMO brain? Explain it to me like I'm a CMO.
Certainly. And I think that like part of it is like there are different measurements also in the attention space, like depending on who you're talking to, what partner you're using, whether you're using something that's like an in-market currency or maybe doing something that is more lab-based from like a research perspective. What we've done is we've partnered with a couple of different companies to understand, like, are there essentially based on their metrics, baselines that we know that when we hit those, we see a spike in a KPI. And so we've done this analysis across a number of different KPIs. And we do see that like when we hit a certain threshold from an attention measurement standpoint, that's where we start to see a lift in something like awareness. And it looks a little bit different than what you might need for something like purchase intent. And so what does that mean to how we overall optimize a media plan if the goal is awareness versus purchase intent? So it's about identifying what those look like. Obviously, like that requires a fair amount of work to be done with, like I mentioned earlier, like we've done a number of studies across the board and we've aggregated those into a data set where we can start to make those kinds of correlations. What's interesting to me though, and we, at this point, it's still an aggregate data set, but we have been able to start to break things out for certain verticals. And the two that we were able to start to get some top line directional results, I was really excited that they were so different, was travel versus food and bev, which when you think about like the purchase cycle and the consideration that goes into a travel purchase versus like food and bev, those are wildly different. And you see it show up in the data. Like what you need to drive awareness, consideration, purchase intent for travel is much higher than what you need for something like the food and bev category. And again, this is directional kind of, again, we've started to break some of this out to start to see if there are hypotheses that we can pursue.
I mean, I do take a long time to figure out where I want to order for dinner. So it is directional. I get it.
Yeah. In my house, I'm the impulsive one. So I'm usually the one who makes the decision.
I'm jealous.
But like, that's interesting to me. Like, these are like additional things that like we should start to understand. Like the one that I'm also really, really curious about, and I don't have the data for it right now, but I'd love to be able to amass it, is market share. And like, what does that mean for like a brand that is well established, has a whole lot of name recognition, high levels of baseline awareness versus someone who's new to market and is trying to break through, has a new product. And like those, my hypothesis is that those also look quite different.
Sure.
And so that one is also interesting to me. But again, like, I don't know, like I'm a curious girl. And so when I start to see these things start to pop, I'm like, oh, well, that could be interesting too.
No, I love this. This is like, I love listening to you speak about this. So like you mentioned that there were some studies you've done. So Teads recently released 2 big studies, one on video and one on CTV. So showing pretty wild engagement numbers. So like, can you, like, what surprised you most about the findings? What share the top line on those?
Yeah. So, I mean, from a CTV perspective, we've done some work relative to CTV home screen in particular, which is a huge area for us. It's really natural to kind of, again, this kind of where we came from in InRead and bringing that into the CTV screen. And so this is a space where, again, like the attention space, and as these new formats launch, these are things that we're learning with partners on how it is we measure this, how it is we engage on this. And so we've done some work both in the US and in our global markets to understand kind of what this looks like relative to attention, because for us, this is something we want to be able to apply against anything it is that we bring to market, because again, we believe in this premise, in this kind of measurement, and we ultimately want to deliver highly attentive, engaging experiences. So when we bring a new product to market, we want to understand what it looks like relative to these kinds of metrics. And we did find that CTV home screen just wildly outperforms from both a viewability and an attention perspective. I think like the baseline notion of that, I wasn't super surprised about. Like, I mean, if you think about it, like the amount of time that we spend sitting in front of the home screen trying to figure out what to watch, that Matt, in my house is what takes the most time.
Okay. No impulsive decisions there, right?
Nothing
it's
impulsive
a commitment.
And generally speaking, we end up on some show that we've already watched 400 times.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Okay.
But it takes us a ton of time to get there. And so the number, like intuitively to me, like, it was like, all right, like that's probably a place where people are paying attention. I think what was surprising to me was, and again, like the methodology that was used, in particular in our study out of France, was a lab-based study. So we're actually understanding eyes on screen. And in the US, we worked with, a partner, T-Vision, who also has a panel. So again, this really is about eyes on screen. And it was the attention to the ads in particular that was high, that I think was a little bit surprising. Like I was like, oh, well, maybe it'll just be the screen itself, but actually to the ads. And I think in addition to that, just how much higher it was relative to CTV streaming. So like in the US work that we did, we found for both viewability and attention, it was plus 20% versus their CTV norms. So like that to me is what was more kind of, I think, surprising, was the pure volume of impact versus the fact that like it was potentially a little bit more attentive, a little bit more engaging, again, just based on kind of, human nature, like my own experience watching TV.
Yeah, I mean, it's an evolving behavior, but also, I mean, if you're looking at that large a data set, like the sample, I mean, does it account for all of the fragmentation now that is happening? And like, my attention span is, I mean, I already forgot what I was about to ask you. That's how short my attention span is. But
Yeah.
the data and insights that you can get from those different studies, those insights are powerful, but then there's the strategy. How do you help the marketers connect the dots across this fragmented ecosystem? Because there is still value in streaming CTV and in mobile and everywhere else. Like, what comes next?
For us, it's certainly about like an omnichannel video strategy and the fact that like different channels deliver different things. And certainly we want to, again, deliver experiences that across the board are highly attentive, but we understand that that varies and that different channels contribute in different ways. I think the other piece is reach and how it is that you scale across, an audience to ensure that you are maximizing your reach. And you're going to do that in different ways. And you're going to build total, incrementality by like going to market with different channels. I mean, we also did another study recently, and that was in partnership with the MMA, which was really about the state of video. And that to me, we dove into different formats. And I think one of the things that was interesting there and kind of gets to some of what you're saying here, Matt, is the market is really interested in testing new formats in the video space, understanding, how it is video can be leveraged to deliver on different things. One of the things that popped in our survey, for example, was engagement-based formats where somebody is actually engaging with the format, or shoppable formats. And so like, what does that mean in terms of like the use case for video? I mean, I think one of the things that was also interesting about that study relative to kind of the video marketplace was just the pure value that marketers see in video. It was over 95% of marketers said that video was either a very important or the most important part of their media mix. In addition to that, kind of how it is spend trends were happening, very large numbers relative to marketers that were expecting to either moderately or significantly increase their video spend. So there's certainly dollars flowing in there, but there's also this interest in understanding kind of what's next in the space, what different formats are available, and what that means relative to how they can engage consumers in different ways.
I work in the video space, which is a really interesting opportunity because of behaviors that have existed for many years on social platforms, right? Scrolling video, and now you bring in the commerce behaviors of add to cart or learn more or post a comment, all these things that can happen within or around video is evolving very quickly, but also creates a lot of different opportunities for, like, right, a brand or a company with whom you're working or I'm working has engagement goals. They have conversion goals. They have awareness goals. Is there an opportunity now where these things are starting to converge and you can accomplish all of them, most of them, with one strategy? Or is it still a very multi-layered approach that they have to be thinking about?
I mean, isn't it about the consumer, Matt? Like what they want,
Who?
right?
I'm not familiar with that term. What are we talking about here? I thought it's about the advertiser. When did the consumer matter? No.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're right, though. The consumer journey, though, which I think is a term I don't really love to use, but at every point, the consumer is doing something along there. But I feel like that has become no longer a funnel, a journey, a linear experience because I'm engaging here, I'm buying there, and it's all happening at once.
I mean, I think that's fair. And I think that, like, I feel like this is something we talk about every few years, like brand versus performance versus brand performance. Can one buy do multiple things? We're measuring brand buy, quote unquote, brand buys to, ROI and ROAS as well in some cases. So, I mean, I feel like this is something that we all, I think engage on and understand. I think that what was interesting to me about kind of, again, the responses that we got relative to different kinds of video. So saw that obviously there was a diversification in terms of like different kinds of video types that you can use. But what I thought was also interesting is we also asked a question about like use case and measurement. And is like video a brand only, use case, or their performance use case tied to it? And what we saw on that data is that the marketers overwhelmingly responded that the primary use case for video is brand storytelling. But when you looked at how they were measuring it, performance was right there next to brand, and then brand and performance was also right there. And I guess like my question is, and if we had done kind of, I think a follow-up with, I would have maybe dove in a little bit more on this topic to kind of understand, like, is it because you're using video, different kinds of video formats in different ways? So now, like, yes, maybe video, always will be a great format for telling a brand story. But because we now have things like more engagement-based units, shoppable units, you're able to deploy those to hit more performance-oriented goals. But video still is also doing that brand storytelling for you in a more traditional way. So I guess like that's kind of where I'm at, is trying to understand, are we being too broad with calling it all video, where video is really kind of diversified now in terms of the different formats you can access, the different creative units, and also like the capability within the video, kind of exactly what you were talking about a little bit before in terms of what you can engage with and what you can do with it. It's not just, a linear television ad anymore.
Yeah, it's so true. So like knowing all of these complicated scenarios that you need to work through, like what's your advice to marketers drowning in dashboards and trying to figure out what's working?
I feel like this has been the story of my career since I started, a million years ago as an analyst on an analytics team. And I think the truth of it is that there's never going to, or at least right now, there's certainly a North Star, and there are things that we can measure too. But I think understanding the context of how things work together is still important. And so if there's a way to very clearly kind of lay these out and to understand kind of how it is you are leveraging different metrics to tell a piece of that story, whether it is something like a viewability because you want to understand that those ads are viewable, whether it's something like attention because you want to understand, that people are actually paying attention to the ads you have, but also bringing in things like efficiency, because you need to understand that you're deploying those efficiently, and then what that looks like relative to the outcome. I do think that like if we just focus on the end outcome, you miss a little bit of how you get there. And that's really critical to how it is you think about media planning, buying, and optimizing. And so understanding the journey of that and where things fall off, where you're retaining, where you're underperforming, I think is just as important as where you're overperforming. And it's about, I think, setting these things up in a clear way that's fit for purpose, and where you've clearly defined why something is part of that narrative and what it is you're trying to understand.
Or also what conditions that may have existed at the time that you were planning or releasing or launching a product that may have impacted certain factors that now are no longer the case, or vice versa, right? From, geopolitical to supply chain to, I told you before we started recording, I was in the room for your Advertising Week panel a few weeks ago I think it was the 8th floor below sea level in the post-apocalyptic Manhattan Mall hollowed out shell. But the panel was, navigating the economic headwinds of the day, right? How do you maximize your ad spend with better measurement, or something, some long title that could have been truncated had they measured it better. But it sounds like a nice way of saying do more with less, right? So what's the real story now that we are in a constant state of economic uncertainty? Is this a condition that we have to account for and maybe not in a few months, or is this just the new norm that we think about?
I feel like for us, it certainly is a little bit of the new norm. I think that things are changing on a pretty regular basis right now, and things are affecting, I think, certain industries, certain verticals one day, and maybe, a few months on, others are being affected. I think that generally speaking, though, in times of uncertainty, you do, at least, what we've historically seen is a push towards more accountability. I think that I think that we've all seen the general trend of, in certain macroeconomic climates, dollars shift more towards performance because people feel like those are more accountable to, an ROI or a ROAS, more business impact. I think that one thing that we try to work with clients on, though, is that we can't forget the power of brand during these kinds of times. And I think we've all seen, the studies and all of the research, and we always reference things like the long and the short of it, which really prove, time and time again that brand does matter. And I think we've seen that in recent times as well. And so while, when we think about, media budgets and how these things are allocated, I think it's important to remember that brand is still critical. You can't drive conversion if people don't know who you are. Like at the end of the day, like brand awareness, consideration, all of those things are important to how it is you drive lower funnel. And this is why I do think it's like the video space is particularly interesting in terms of how it is you tell those brand stories, even if there is a little bit of an element of kind of, again, more, conversion oriented or engagement oriented, that is more, in that kind of action bucket. So I do think that's interesting, but we do talk a lot about it. We're a full funnel platform, and the ability to execute both brand is critical to how it is ultimately business results are sustained.
Yeah. And I think about loyalty too, like the idea of
100%.
like loyalty to brands is just so different, but
lowers acquisition cost.
True. So are we finally reaching a point where measurement drives planning and there's no semblance of like postmortems anymore? I would say the answer is yes, but I think where do you feel like people should be looking to measurement in order to iterate and optimize and plan against? I feel like there's when you think about DTC brand that's like a challenger brand and new, and the way they can be a lot more nimble about choosing how and where they spend their dollars versus like these big conglomerates who have monstrous budgets and kind of set it and tend to rely on what they did the year before. Oftentimes, how do you kind of navigate those waters with people?
Yeah, and I think, certainly we're seeing measurement play a far bigger role. And some of that is about data access. Some of that is about the way that, AI again is improving speed to market in terms of accessibility
Sure.
of that data. I guess for me, there are a few things that come down to like the essentials of how it is we plan media and what's critical. I think it's really important to understand reach and to understand incremental reach and how it is you're reaching the audience that you're targeting and how you're reaching new audiences, to ensure that again you're getting the advertising that you're investing in front of the right eyeballs, in terms of your core audience, and then newer eyeballs as you seek to engage. I do think that understanding what your core or your KPI for the campaign is from a campaign outcome perspective is critical, and being precise about that if you can be. Again, this is really complicated and there's a lot of different metrics out there. But if ultimately you've decided that the campaign is designed to drive people into store, let's be sure that we are accessing that data as readily as we can. If we are understanding that there are different parts or components of the media campaign that are better contributing to it, let's certainly think about what that means. If we see that there are portions that are under contributing or underperforming, like why is that? Is there a way to improve that performance? Again, because we need to balance it with things like reach and scale, and being thoughtful about that and ensuring that you are remembering what the campaign was designed to do and to impact, and doing your best to have the measurement in place that can actually enable you to understand that. And then I think at the end of the day, like we'd be lying if efficiency and kind of cost pers and understanding like how it is that media is delivering relative to the investment isn't something that also is critical to managing a media budget overall, and understanding the contribution in different ways to that end outcome. But I think we're looking at those things in concert, but again, being thoughtful about what it is you're trying to achieve, implementing the measurement as best you can. And I think that, we can have a debate on a different day about, data and where the gaps in the measurement are. But, accessing the measurement data that sets you up best to inform your ability to actually have achieved that goal and to make decisions about how to better reach that goal, I think is a core piece of it.
I just think it's incredible that a few liberal arts majors from college are here talking about media metrics. Like, this is not what I thought I would be talking. You're an English major. Oh, where'd you go to school?
Notre Dame.
Ah, Fighting Irish. There you go. Is this what you thought you'd be talking about? In the middle of your career when you were.
When I was writing my fourth paper on The Great Gatsby, this was certainly.
Oh, we could have a whole conversation about that. As someone who now I live on the North Shore of Long Island, and I feel like all I've ever aspired to be is a Gatsby. But I am instead here talking about how we measure attention and performance. What's the next evolution of attention metrics? Like, does it become standard currency or another layer on the stack, or something that we forget about when we're sipping martinis, staring across East Egg and West Egg from one another?
No, I really do think that this is how we measure media quality. I do think that like one thing that's also interesting about attention versus like a viewability per se, is the efforts that are being made to make it more universal. And I think, again, acknowledging that how it is you measure attention is different depending on your channel, certainly. But the efforts to make it more universal, to understand what it looks like in a CTV versus in an in-read mobile format versus in a cinema, or something like that. And to be able to say, this is a measure of quality across different channels, I do think is interesting. Again, for me, I think that we'll start to see maybe more of this relative to how it is we manage an upper funnel campaign in particular, thinking about that proxy to a brand lift that we can feel really confident in. So I don't think it's going away. I don't. And I think it's really about media quality and how it is we do a better job of measuring that, being able to optimize to it, because all the research shows that more premium, placements and premium publishers, content quality matters to how it is that the advertising is effective.
Well, I am looking forward to listening back to this conversation, this episode, and then sharing the metrics with you so we can figure out at what point we lost people's attention, where we may have gotten it back, and how we can optimize for the future. Because if we're not looking at the data, then what are we even doing here, guys? No, seriously, Neala, thank you. This has been this is an area of our industry that I don't think people talk enough about because they're doing it, and the ability to analyze and assess how we analyze and assess is sometimes more fun than people might think. So I will end there with the hard questions, but what I want to do, and this is where we'll see how long we can hold your attention, is go to our lightning round, which is really a series of unprepared yet loosely scripted questions that are meant to be answered in as long or as short a format as you want. That fair? You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. We'll see how I do.
There's no grading, but the metrics will tell us. What is a marketing buzzword? And I've said a bunch already in the last few minutes, but what's one word that you want to just get rid of and retire forever?
So there is a word that I when it physically comes out of my mouth, I apologize out loud to people, and that's synergy.
I'm there with you. I'm connected. I'm
done on that one. I think I know what it means, but then sometimes I use it and I'm like, is that what it means? It's just, it's funny. I've got a really close group of girlfriends that I've known my entire life, and none of them kind of work in a more corporate world, and they'll send me memes on TikTok about, corporate speak. And they'll be like, do you actually speak like this? And I'm like, you actually do. I used that 10 minutes ago, but synergy is the one that I every time I get a video with that in it, I'm like, oh, I'm physically feeling.
Boil the ocean.
Mine is the funnel is dead, which it may be true, but if I see that one more time in a slide, I'm throwing my laptop into the upper funnel.
Yep, I'll take that one.
What is a recent campaign that has actually earned your attention?
I mentioned this one actually last week at Adweek, and I love it. It's the newer Nike campaign. I'm a big Nike gal. I think if I ever need to feel something, I watch a Nike ad. Sometimes you just need a minute and to feel your humanity. Yeah. And Nike has done that. And the whole, the just do it piece and why you do it in that transition, I think has been really amazing. I think also the way that they've taken something that's so core to their brand and taken a look at the climate around them and how they modify that for kind of the world that we live in, and things like the anxious generation and how it is you communicate with kids in terms of sports and the motivators there. That to me is somebody who, is still pulling at our heartstrings in the way that they always have, but is also taking stock at how the world is a little bit different than maybe it was 20, 30 years ago when they came up with the original tagline.
Yeah, I love it.
In terms of just do it, I am talking to two women who grew up in Boston. One of you stayed, one of you left, but neither of you has a Boston accent. I am wondering, how did you do it?
It's really interesting because my parents definitely still have them. I think they're a little bit more muted than they were when I was a kid, but my accent is a journey. When people ask for fun facts, it's one of the ones that I use. That and the fact that I'm very passionate about Benihana, just wanted to sneak that in. But I
smell it from here, by the way. You're Benihana.
I'm from Boston. My parents are from Boston. My grandparents are from Boston. And however, when I learned to talk, lived in Dublin, Ireland. My dad had a job opportunity, so we lived there when I was really little. So I came back.
Fighting Irish as a kid and fighting Irish for school. Wow, there you go.
Full circle.
Yeah.
But when we came back to Boston, I had a full-on Irish brogue, or so I've been told. And I actually kept it for about 6 months, and then went to kindergarten in South Boston, and apparently was made fun of for having an Irish brogue, which I find a little bit complicated given the history of the Irish in Boston. That feels weird. It feels like they might like that. But apparently within 2 weeks, I had a very thick Boston accent. and kept that for quite a while. When I was in high school, we moved across the city. So out of South Boston into an area that's a little bit more residential on the other side of the city. The accent muted a little bit like when I lived there, but then I went to college in the Midwest. And the truth is, like, in my freshman year, I think that I got asked if I could pack a car like so many times at parties that I finally was like, I can also park it. And I lived in Chicago for a few years after college. So just, I think, like, a lot of time kind of in that environment. But I will tell you this, one of my husband's favorite games when I've had a cocktail is when will it show up?
It's always with the cocktails. It's so true.
And now my colleagues are also in on this game, and there are a few words that in particular, like, I still can't really get out of my mouth. But it's a fun little game he likes to play.
I feel like you could have been an actress with the ability to change your.
I mean, the truth is, though, like, I'm actually really bad at accents. So, like,
oh, you are.
This probably deserves its own, like, social media handle that you could turn into a meme, like a single theme meme. Speaking of social media, is a 10 or 6 or 15 second view on TikTok the same as a 15-second view on Hulu?
I don't think so. I think when you think about the experience of those two things, TikTok is deeply engaging. It's a smaller screen, like, you're right in front of that. And I think it is a different experience than on the television screen. I do.
And the last one, I will ask you to finish this sentence. The future of media will belong to the brands who...
Oh, my.
I told you, it's easy. We always end with just an easy one.
I mean, that's really...
I think it will belong to the brands who don't forget who they are and make sure that they continue to tell that story.
Wow. You have told an incredible story. So thank you for sharing all of this with us. I've appreciated getting to know you. Yeah, this was fun. And
nice meeting you.
Let's do it again, maybe before we have to return to the basement of the Manhattan Mall. Is that fair?
I'd love that.
All right. Thanks again, Neala.
I'll look you up in Boston.
Thank you.
Bye.
What a way to end. And I can tell you that Neala had my attention the entire time. Thanks for joining, thanks for sharing, and thanks for listening to this episode of the Snarketing Podcast. Until next time, wishing you all a snarky Halloween.